How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Dysfunctional Commentary. So, this thing is huge. Obviously, we're talking about the recently released Godzilla Showa-Era films collection from Criterion. And I don't know what I expected when I ordered this. I knew that it was going to be in a book design based on what I had read. But I think I was expecting something more along the lines of a digibook, something that was closer to the size of a standard Blu-ray case. But this is like a coffee table book. And I have a 2-year-old running around the house, so leaving this thing on my coffee table is probably not the best idea. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. It obviously won't fit on my standard DVD and Blu-ray shelf, so I'll have to think of something else. I'll figure something out. But all kidding aside, as a collector's piece, this thing is really cool looking. And this video is going up a little bit later than I had originally intended, and the reason for that is I wanted to spend some time with this before I did a video that gave any kind of feedback. I have not watched everything that's included here, but I think I've watched enough at this point where I can at least give some impressions. So we're going to take a look at this and go over everything that's included, and then we'll talk about it. So here it is. I've switched up the camera angle here simply because the size of this thing makes it easier to do it this way rather than having me sit on the couch with it. So it's in a hardcover book, and the artwork on this is really cool. I actually really like the way that this thing looks. And then here's the back of it. It's a very nice looking hardbound book. Now, you open it up, and some more of this artwork. And the whole thing starts off with an introductory essay by film historian Steve Ryfle. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Steve Ryfle. And it just gives a lot of information about the films. It's very insightful, very interesting. And then after that, it goes into full-page layouts of each of the films that are included in this, starting with Godzilla. You have some very interesting, very cool artwork in this. This is a very nice looking book. And then it has all kinds of information of each of the films. So I'm going to go through each of these, and that'll be my way of showing you all of the films that are included. So of course we have Godzilla here. It has both the original Japanese version of Godzilla, Gojira, and Godzilla King of the Monsters is the re-edited version that was released in the United States. We have Godzilla Raids Again. King Kong versus Godzilla. And this does include both the American release of King Kong versus Godzilla as well as the original Japanese version. We have Mothra versus Godzilla. This is some really cool artwork. I really like that one. Next up, we have Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Ghidorah. This one's kind of interesting. Invasion of Astro-Monster. I love this one. Anyone who's seen Invasion of Astro-Monster knows Godzilla's victory dance that he does on Planet X. I love the fact that they chose that as the scene to do the art on for this particular movie. I think that's hysterical. I love it. Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. Ebirah? I don't know. I've heard it pronounced both ways. Son of Godzilla. Destroy All Monsters. This was supposed to be the last of the Toho films. It was kind of the all-out monster bash. They just pulled out all the stops, brought all their monsters in, or at least a good chunk of them. Had them all fight. But of course it wasn't the last one. All Monsters Attack came next. This is probably my least favorite Godzilla film, by the way. Godzilla versus Hedorah, Godzilla versus Gigan, Godzilla versus Megalon. Kind of an interesting piece of artwork. There's Jet Jaguar. Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Terror of Mechagodzilla. And then, of course, here you have the typical Criterion spread about the transfers, and then it gives the special thanks and production credits and things of that nature. This is typical for Criterion releases. And then after that, here's where the discs are. Now let me get this out of the way. Typically, I do not like this style of packaging for optical media, where they put them in these little pockets. The reason being that it creates contact with the disc themselves, and therefore it increases the likelihood that the discs will become scratched or damaged in some way. So I typically don't like this style of packaging. Now that being said, the way it's done here isn't terrible, actually. You have the inner ring is exposed, and you can get your finger on the inner ring and the outer edge, so you don't actually have to touch the media side of the disc with your fingers, leaving fingerprints of that nature. You can get these out fairly easily, and as long as you're careful, I think that it's fine. In addition to that, these are Blu-rays, and Blu-rays are way more resistant to damage and scratching than DVDs. Had these been DVDs, this would have been a nightmare, because DVDs, you breathe on them the wrong way and they get scratched. Blu-rays, on the other hand, can take a little bit more of a beating. So as I said, as long as you're careful with these, it should be fine. There are 8 discs included in this collection. The last of the discs included is the supplemental disc, and this is actually where the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla exists. I wasn't sure at first. I was looking for it on the King Kong versus Godzilla disc, and I was a little upset at first because I had read that the Japanese version was going to be included and did not see it at first, but it is actually included on the supplements disc, and I watched that the other night. So anyway, there it is, the Criterion release of the Showa-Era films, Godzilla. It's a very nice looking release. Okay, first things first. If you are a fan of Godzilla, you probably already have picked up the previously released Criterion edition of Godzilla, the original film. When I heard that the original Godzilla was going to be included in the Showa-Era collection, I wondered if they were going to do anything different with it, and it does not appear so. The menu design was changed to match the rest of the collection, but the actual content on that disc appears to be the same as this. I think they probably included that just so that it could be a complete collection, but if you are picking up the Showa-Era collection, chances are high you already own the other Criterion edition of the original Godzilla, so now you have 2. Next up is the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla. I was very excited to watch that version of the film because I'd never seen the original Japanese version of that film before. It never got an official North American release. When I watched it the other night, I noticed a couple of things. Primarily towards the beginning of the film, there are some scenes where the quality of the image noticeably degrades and the color even shifts a couple of times. And I think what's happening here is that they didn't have 35mm source material for those particular shots, because it appears to me that they are using standard definition footage for those shots and then up-resing it to high definition to fill in the gaps of whatever was missing from the 35mm transfer. It's very noticeable when this happens, but as I said, it seems to be isolated towards the beginning of the film, so it doesn't really ruin the experience, but it is worth mentioning. Honestly, it's just kind of cool to have the original Japanese version of the film available. Next up is the idea of alternate versions of the films. The original Godzilla has both the original Japanese version and the American re-edit of that film. King Kong vs. Godzilla has the original Japanese version and the American re-edit of that film. But that's it. No other alternate versions are included. And in some cases, some of the films don't even have an English dub track. Now, that doesn't really bother me because I prefer to watch these films in their original form with the original language track and English subtitles, but some people like to watch these films with an English dub track, so it's worth mentioning because that may disappoint some people. There are 8 Blu-rays included in this collection and 15 movies. And I thought maybe they would put 2 movies per disc for the majority of the discs, but in some instances, they're actually putting 3 movies onto a single disc. And to me, that's getting a little bit cramped. I think they probably should have spread this out over a few more discs. And finally, I wanted to mention this. I have here a DVD box set put out by Classic Media that has some of the Showa-Era films that are included in this collection. For a long time, the DVDs included here were the best way to watch these films, at least in North America. And in some ways, that's still the case, and I'll explain why. I already mentioned that apart from the original Godzilla and King Kong vs. Godzilla, that only the original Japanese versions of the films are included in the set from Criterion. The DVDs in this box set all have the original Japanese versions and the American versions, and they all have the original language tracks and English dubs. But more importantly than that, while I was watching some of the movies from the Criterion set, and this is not the case for every single movie in the collection, but several of the movies that I watched, I noticed splice marks throughout the movies. And what that is it's a visible mark that appears on the screen when there's an edit from one shot to another. It's caused by taking a strip of film and then physically splicing it to another strip of film during the editorial process. And it's jarring to see these white marks appearing at the bottom of the screen every time that there's an edit from one shot to another. I'm not talking about just a couple of times. I'm talking consistently. I'm talking practically every time there's an edit throughout the entirety of the film. And so I went back to these DVDs because I was thinking to myself, I wonder if anything like that is present in these, and I just don't remember it being like that. And no. Anything like that had been cleaned up in these DVDs. And what that means is that DVDs put out by Classic Media in 2006, 2007, in many ways have better transfers than Blu-rays put out in 2019 by Criterion. There's something wrong with that sentence. At the very least, it's disappointing. But look, if you are a Godzilla fan, this thing is still a no-brainer. You've probably already purchased this, or at the very least are planning on doing so. And I'm not trying to say that this is not worth picking up. It's still great to have these movies in high definition, and it's the only way to get these movies on Blu-ray, at least in North America. And even with DVD, several of these movies are out of print now, so this is really the best option. But I can't help shaking the feeling that some of the transfers could have and should have been done better. So, final thoughts on this. As a collector's piece, this thing is awesome, and I in no way regret picking this thing up. It is great to have these movies all in one collection on Blu-ray in high definition. My only real criticisms, as I mentioned, are I think it should have been spread out over a few more discs, and it's a little disappointing that some of the transfers weren't cleaned up a little bit better. But the quality of the films, they are so, for the most part, they are so entertaining that they elevate the collection beyond any of those issues that I mentioned. Now, if you have purchased this, I'd be curious to know what you thought about these issues that I brought up. Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm full of it? Either way, leave a comment and let me know. I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say on this. But other than that, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. I still recommend picking this one up, even though I mentioned that I had a couple of issues with it. But it's still a great collection, and as a collector's piece for a Godzilla fan, like I said, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer to pick this one up. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.